It's harder as you get older. When you're young, you're open to new ideas because you haven't settled on many ideas yet, perhaps. So you're searching. So young people tend to experiment more with lots of different things. Older people tend to say, well, it's good enough where it is. But so we resist. So this creates a clash between generations. But we'll have progress only if we have these new ideas coming forth. Reject the use of violence, force, and threats. I mean, these are very simple rules, but these are at the heart of this argument for a society of free and responsible individuals. Judge not lest you be judged. I mean, don't jump to conclusions. These are simple guidelines. Now, what is this going to look like? Well, I'm suggesting here that individuals have a moral primacy. That is, morals reside in human action. Morality is the outcome of human choice. Morals are those things which guide us to do good things. Sometimes, if you've got a bad moral structure, they may guide you to the wrong thing. But what we have to see is that when it comes to collective action, whether it's involving governments, it's much more difficult to talk about moral content of collective actions. Now, for example, if I want to help him, and I deeply believe that he deserves to be helped, is it morally just for me to force him to help him? Is that moral? No. There's no morality in that. If I wanted to help him, I'd reach in my pocket and give it to him. But for me to use either force or some other sort of means to get him to do what I think is a moral act, it stripped out the morality. Even though the decision may have been based on, in my mind, a clear moral obligation. But if it's a moral obligation, it's mine, it's not his. He doesn't know him, never met him. And anyway, he's looking after him. He doesn't have the resources. So, when we get into the question of collective action, in particular governments or the state, we have to be very careful that they're trying to convince us that they're doing moral things, that they're driven by moral impulses. Well, they're driven by their moral impulses, but if they use this vehicle, the state, to carry them out, you can't really make a strong claim that that is a moral act. So, this is where it becomes problematic with, say, the welfare state. Now, the welfare state is just that. I want to help him, but I force all of you to do it. And then I say, I help the poor. Well, let me tell you how it works. Now, if I have a moral obligation and I want to give him $1, how much will he receive? $1. Now, if I'm the state and I say, I need $1 to help him, so I take it from him, how much is he going to receive? You think he'll get $1? Well, Rajiv Gandhi, who had been the head of the son of Indira Gandhi, when he was running for public office, he said, and this was in India, and I think he was quite an optimist. He said, here in India, if we raise $1 to spend on behalf of the poor, they get 10 cents. Where's the morality? I mean, if I give money, he gets it all. If the state gets money, he might get 10%. Governments are expensive. Chauffeurs, offices, pensions, air conditioning, whatever it may be, salaries. It takes a lot. The welfare state is a huge burden and it's very inefficient, and it cannot be wrapped up in a moral argument unless you believe morals or moral action is something other than human action. So, this free society is egalitarian, not in possession of material well-being. Because we'll all, I mean, look, you're younger than me. He's better looking than me. This is unjust. Nah, it's not unjust. It's just bad luck on my part. I was born a long time ago. I had different genetics. So it's not going to be egalitarian in how we, because her youth, his beauty, will allow you to do things I can't do. And that will allow you to achieve things I can't do that might elevate your status in terms of income or wealth or respect by the community. So these inequalities in that regard are simply an aspect of human nature and human life. There's no injustice there. An injustice would be if I, killed him so that I could take his place to replace the time with a beautiful woman that we both desire. Those would be injustices. Now, it's egalitarian in the sense that everyone has equal moral status. And this goes back again to that slavery question. And no legal or political order, whether it's called democracy or autocracy or monarchy, no political structure can assign different moral worth or values. Oh, of course they can try, but that goes against humanity. That goes against human nature. And the good thing about human nature, it wins out eventually. It may take time, it may take decades or centuries. We finally overthrew the monarchs, right? In this part of the world, you finally overthrew an evil empire. Humanity emerged victorious. So, you cannot eliminate those values by simply having some political dictate. It's universalist. Again, it's, one of the things that we were talking about in the Free Market Roadshow is supposed to be European values. I always worry about the arrogance to suggest that values are anything other than human values. The suggestion is that you elevate your values over maybe other regions of the world. I think that's problematic. So I like to talk about human values, of which there are values that Europeans may more happily embrace than other parts of the world. But I think fundamentally, at the basis of living life, we have shared human values that are very important. So we shouldn't, and this goes back to this debate about open borders, that just because someone happened to be born on one side of a line or river that may speak the same language or come from very similar backgrounds, they have a different passport, they're not allowed to go across that line. These are really problematic issues. As I mentioned, it's progressive and optimistic, that I believe that this free society is how we have human progress. In terms of economics, one of the messages that we've been repeating on the Free Market Roadshow is the importance of entrepreneurs as an engine of human progress. Entrepreneurs generate new ideas, new products. They generate a momentum, new jobs. This is where we get human progress. And it also, entrepreneurs give us cultural progress. We get rap, music, that's a cultural phenomenon. And every country, I can remember when it first started happening globally, when I first heard rap in another language, because I was always accustomed to rap in English, something like English. And then when I heard this, a white French guy singing rap, it was like, what is that? But cultural progress comes from this experimentation, and it's a kind of an entrepreneurial process. Okay, here we go. Now, we're going to focus more on the particular topic at hand. Drugs. Now, the drugs, drug is a very expansive thing. Maybe we could talk about aspirin, we could talk about heroin, we could talk, alcohol is a drug, okay? There's lots of different drugs. But what we're going to start with is to give a framework about adult freedom of choice. Well, we go back to this idea of a free and responsible individual in this community. So we must respect people's desire and interest. Otherwise, we're all slaves, or at least potentially slaves, to other people's decision on what is good for us. Now, at your age, many of you are probably more reluctant than I am to go against your parents and to demand your interests over theirs. But time will come, perhaps, for some of you. But so even our parents, at some moment, have to give up that domination of you. But very few of us, and certainly your parents, would not wish for your neighbors to dominate your interests and guide you against what they believe is right. So this idea that we must be allowed, otherwise someone else is choosing our life outcomes. Now, this doesn't mean we don't have debate or discussion or saying, you know, I did it, it's a bad idea, I had a bad trip with LSD, I suggest you don't. Actually, mine were good. But it doesn't mean that you don't try to debate. But the problem is, in what we'll see in a moment, if you make it illegal, it turns off the debate. So your parents say, don't do it, it's against the law. That's it. Instead of, look, it's legal, we need to discuss these things. It's a much better way if you want to have some sort of give and take. But prohibition, we'll see, turns off the debate pretty quickly. So being free to choose has its intrinsic values on its own. You know, experimentation, learning from your mistakes. It's better if you learn from other people's mistakes. But if you're like me, I have to learn from my own. Smarter ones here see that other people blunder, then they avoid it. But people can learn to create a good life if they're free to choose. You'll discover through your own experimentations, observing other people, interacting in a social framework based upon the sort of rule structures and values that are determined there. But you need to have that freedom to choose, or your life won't be good. It won't be your own. How can it be good if it's not yours? If it's the outcome of someone who forced you and pressed you into doing things. What happens is, when we have these prohibitions, there's this lack of learning. You're just told that it's bad. It's a much better thing to say, you know, don't smoke, it's against the law. You know, you smoke, fine. It goes wrong, then you learn, okay, I don't want to do that again. Now, government should neither regulate nor prohibit personal behavior or lifestyle choices. Again, this is an assertion, but it's based upon this, for me, this logic of self-ownership. It comes out of that argument in my mind. Regulation and prohibition are based upon dubious paternalism or elitism. So we had this experiment in the United States where a group of early feminists helped create a law so that no one in the United States could drink alcohol of any form. Now this was, I mean, people, civilized people can have a drink of alcohol without becoming crazy and beating up their wives or leaving their children. But this was a law that imposed someone's moral framework on everyone. And it turned out it was a disaster on virtually every level. Legal prohibitions tend to make things worse. Before the prohibition on alcohol in the U.S., most Americans drank either beer or wine, mostly. But after Prohibition, they began to drink hard alcohol, much of which was produced under uncertain conditions, because it was a higher value added item, and it's easier to hide a bottle of whiskey than a barrel of beer. And they might have both had the same value in the market prior to that, but now you can get like 5 or 6 boxes of beer, of whiskey, and so America began drinking much harder alcohol, which the feminists were all angry about, said because they were getting drunk. Well, now they got drunk a lot more, and they become more violent. Now, so what we find is that it also created the mafia in the United States, which was a criminal enterprise that, because of the high profits, was able to degrade civil society and the democratic process. We'll see how that's been repeated. So we almost never see prohibition solving the problem that it's supposed to address. Now let's look at this war on drugs. That's the one thing I found here. There was a famous article, cartoon years ago, it said they showed a nice egg. It said, "This is your mind," and then they said, "This is your mind on drugs," and it was a cracked egg. It was all scrambled together. So the idea was that, don't do drugs because your brain won't. Well, this is kind of the response to that. The war on drugs has been one of the most damaging public policies in history.